Of course, you're on your election headquarters. Now, with two transitions, Ghana has had 6 successful elections, and we are on to our 7th, another fourth republic dispensation. Our elections have been monitored by the international community. Largely, the international community has described our elections as credible over the years. With 20 days to the December 7 polls, a core team of European Union observers are in Ghana. 24 observers have been deployed across the country by the EU to monitor our general elections. So if we've had 6 successful elections, why is the EU still monitoring our electoral processes? Mark Stevens is Deputy Chief Observer, European Union Election Observer Mission to Ghana 2016, and is here to help us with a conversation. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure.
First of all, what's your gut feeling about this election?
Well, election observers don't really follow their gut feelings. We always hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And so we're here really to observe what happens and to report and really to try and give a very honest, impartial and independent assessment. And that's why we have, as you just said, teams all over the country to try and get a feel, not just for what's happening in Accra, not what's just being reported by the media per se, but to really get a feel from all over the country.
So what's the strategy like on the ground?
Yeah, basically we have a team here in Accra, 7 of us, and then we have observers in each of the regions. And we're kind of doing the similar things at the national and regional levels. So meeting the election commissions, officials, meeting political parties, meeting civil society, leaders of organisations, the police, following the election campaign, and really trying to build up a good picture, really at the grassroots, and getting the overview of everything that's going on.
So far?
So far, it's been a good engagement, actually. Our observers have been in the fields for about 10 days now, and we've been here for a few weeks. And they've been following the preparations for the election and the election campaign. So we're quite pleased with how our observers are getting on and all the different reports they're making. Of course, Ghana's a very diverse country. It's a very large country, so it's a different story in different parts of the country.
So, you know, you always come and monitor, and then in the end you say we've had successful elections. So I'm wondering why you're here. Well,
firstly, we're invited to be here by the Electoral Commission, and the European Union has a long history of engagement, as you're saying. But I would view that very much, election observation, as a support mechanism. You know, the European Union had a large mission here in 2008. It had a smaller expert team in 2012. And now it had an expert mission here in the summer following the voter registration process. This is very much sort of part of the EU's programme of support to the elections in Ghana and to the continuing strengthening of democracy in the country. You know, democracy is a process. You have to keep working at it and keep nurturing it. I think that's the way I'd see it. And the election observation is part of that. And a very important part of our work is at the end is to issue a whole series of recommendations, things that can be improved for the future. And that's really very much the spirit in which we're here. In addition, the European Union supports Ghana in various other ways on its democracy. It provides support to some of the constitutional commissions, such as the National Civic and Education Commission.
The NCCE.
And yes, NCCE, and also the Electoral Commission and others. So it's really a broad body of support which has been going on for many years. But it's not our presence isn't a judgment. Our presence should be viewed as a support mechanism, really.
Anything that you've recommended in the past that you see us implement in this particular election?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. We were talking about this the other day. And some of our recommendations coincided with some of the reforms that were suggested here in Ghana, which is, you know, I think perhaps that's because they're obvious. Such as, if you look at 2012, some of the queues that were happening. Clearly they needed to reduce the number of voters at each polling station. Not everywhere, but particularly the large urban areas. I was here myself in 2012 and I remember seeing that. So I think the increase in the number of polling stations is a positive thing. Transparency measures. Elections, if you could say one key word for an electoral process that can help, it's the word transparency. You'll hear election observers say it thousands of times during their presence. It really is, any election anywhere in the world, transparency is the key. And so we made some recommendations on that, and we were quite interested to see the reforms that have been brought in have put in transparency measures for the count and the results in quite a comprehensive manner, which was very welcomed as well. So there were 2 of the areas that we sort of commented on. There were other areas we made recommendations where there haven't been changes. No, but maybe for the future, hopefully.
So such as?
Such as the size of the constituencies.
Okay.
There's a massive difference in the size of the constituencies. Your constitution says they should be more or less of equal size. They're not. It's a problem in a number of countries, and it's a very difficult problem to overcome. We recognise that, but we recommended it before, and I could probably predict we'll recommend it again. So that would be another one. Campaign expenditure, campaign spending. Some countries have limits on campaign spending, some don't. So that's something that we considered. But what's more critical possibly is that campaign expenditure by parties needs to be transparent and accountable. And I think that the sort of processes here are not that well developed in terms of making sure campaign expenditure is accountable. And I think that's a good practice which exists in many places. So that was another area.
But if the state is not funding the individual political parties, how do you hold them accountable?
That's a good point, and I know one of the some of the political parties that have made that point. But I think even in countries where you don't have state funding of political parties, they are still accountable for, they should still be accountable for the money they spend on the electoral process. And it's to stop, you know, the types of payments being made that shouldn't be made. So it's to keep a check on that. Some people also say it's a way of keeping a check that the amount of money spent on an election doesn't get out of control in a country when perhaps that money should be going on other things. So there's different ways of looking at it. These are all just suggestions from us, and they're seen as good practices, things that can help.
Yeah. What do you make of the many court cases that the Electoral Commission has had to battle? I'm sure with the few weeks that you've been around, you've seen a couple of them. Is this healthy?
Well, it's been interesting, and it was a dimension I hadn't anticipated before we arrived. I think first thing to say is it's what is foreseen in the law. If you're a candidate, you submit your nomination papers, the Election Commission makes a decision. If you don't like that decision, you can go to court, and then you can appeal that to the Supreme Court or something. This is what is foreseen. If you have a challenge against some work of the Election Commission, and I think, you know, for example, somebody took this special voting case to court as well, you can challenge that in the courts. So it's healthy in the sense that things are being taken to the court, and it's the rule of law determining. I think where you need to be careful is that those cases don't start impacting too heavily on the electoral timelines themselves. But the final Supreme Court decision on nominations kind of brought closure, more or less, to that aspect. And the Electoral Commission's now going on with its printing of ballot papers and preparations for the poll. So in a sense, it's healthy. You know, in lots of countries, people don't go to courts; they go to the streets. So I think that's a good process, possibly.
There are fears that there will be more of these actions, even when we're getting very close to December 7, and even on December 7 itself.
Legal actions?
Yes.
Okay, well, we should follow that closely.
But then, you know, when I asked this question yesterday, somebody prompted me that even with the US elections, on the election day proper, the president-elects now took an action, a legal action.
Yeah, the US elections are very famous for that, and so in the UK, I'm from the UK, it's less of a phenomena, less litigious, I suppose.
But how different is our political processes from the other countries, say in sub-Saharan Africa that you visited and monitored?
Yeah, I mean, the European Union has observed many elections all over the world. I think it's now observed over 100 elections around the world, in Latin America, in Asia, in Africa, and in Africa a lot itself. And I myself, actually, by coincidence, because of other jobs, I've observed elections a lot in Africa, in West Africa.
How many have you observed?
Around the world, I've observed around 50 elections in my life. Yeah, I don't know how that happened, but it's happened. But in Africa, I don't know, probably about 15 or something like this.
Okay.
I worked for the Commonwealth for a number of years, so that's quite engaged. That's one of the reasons I was here in 2012. And I think what we learn is you don't compare elections necessarily. You don't compare what happens in one country, what happens in another country. What's critical is that you judge the election in that country at that time against how it's conducted and against the laws of that country, and whether that country is adhering to the regional international standards to which it's committed itself. So we never actually do a comparison as such. Yeah.
Well, in Ghana, we've had the US and the UK embassies react to the violent clashes, unfortunately, that we've seen, saying, for instance, that he would not grant visas to persons who are seen fomenting trouble or bringing violence in these elections. Can I get your take on this?
Well, I mean, I saw their statements. And all I would say is, from an observation mission perspective, you know, there's no place for violence in an election. I think everyone is against violence. And not least of which because any one incident is regrettable, but because one incident can lead to another incident, can lead to another, and that can spiral out of control, particularly as tensions rise during a campaign. So I think it's very important to say, you know, we're completely against violence in election. I think it should be condemned by everyone. And so I think, you know, some people have issued statements on that. What's interesting in the Ghanaian context is you have a very interesting and well-developed, what I would call election architecture. And as I go around the world in different elections, people often talk about some aspects of the Ghanaian system, and notably the IPAC mechanism and this election security task forces, which bring together various actors. And I know some people say, oh, it's not working so well, and other people say it's working very well, but the fact that it exists is a very positive feature where people can come together and discuss and receive information and discuss and try and resolve misunderstandings or disputes before they get out of control. So I think those two things, and also the very active involvement of civil society, the very active involvement of religious leaders and such things, it's a very positive feature. And I remember in 2012 thinking this and looking at things like the Kumasi Declaration, looking at the work of IPAC, looking at the work of the Election Security Task Forces, and really thinking these things are very, very helpful in helping to manage an electoral process. So hopefully people continue to use those and listen to them as well.
And even with the judiciary, we've got a task force specifically for the election.
Yes.
Coincidentally today, a manual is being launched, which would help judges and essentially all of us speed up matters that are related to the elections.
Yeah, and
so
that's
there's one book with all the laws, with all the specific cases in the past, all cited in it, so that judges can see it and follow it, and it will help with speedy processes.
That's very good. You know, one of the key international standards for elections is that people should have the right to an effective legal remedy. And effective doesn't only just mean that the process works for them, but also that it works in a timely way. That if you have, for example, a complaint about your right to vote or your right to stand, it's resolved in good time before the election. If you have a complaint about the results of an election, they are resolved in a reasonable time afterwards. You know, these are things that election observers often talk about, the timing factor in legal decisions. It's very important to increase confidence, I think.
But if we keep also going to the courts with all the cases and not sitting down to engage, even though we've got room for that, we're not taking advantage of that a lot. Doesn't it, in a sense, continue to build the tension, because it looks like now it's only the courts that can resolve our issues? Yeah.
I don't know. People have rights, and if they feel those rights are not being respected, we look at candidate and voter registration. We follow the conduct of the media, actually. We monitor the media's coverage of the election. Then we look at the preparations, the voting, the counting, and the transmission of results. So if the election is over on the 7th of December in round one, our mission will leave Ghana around the 23rd of December. So get home just in time for Christmas. If it goes to round two, then we leave around the middle of January.
Then you miss Christmas at home.
I have Christmas in Ghana, so that's fine.
Okay. All right. So what is the, I don't know if you've started writing the reports, or because you're monitoring the media houses as well. What's happening? What's different this time around?
No, well, what we do is we have a qualitative and quantitative monitoring of the media, and what that means is basically we have a large team of monitors following a number of TV stations, including your own, some private media, state media, TV, radio, newspapers, and also looking a little bit at social media to see how they conduct the election, how they cover the election in terms of the balance of coverage. Is there a bias towards one party or another party in their coverage? Because I think it's, you know, media should provide a balanced coverage of the election. We also look at any instances of incitement or any articles which might sort of promote sort of ill feeling. And then we look at, on the other side, we look at the rights afforded to journalists and whether journalists are free to conduct their duties, freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of right to information and such things. So we look at the context for journalists as well in a country, because, you know, the media coverage is an integral part of an electoral process.
There's an issue with the kind of language that we use because there are some stations that are affiliated to certain political parties.
Right.
Is that one that you're monitoring as well?
Yeah, I mean, we do. We try to look at a cross section of media. It's fair to say we can't do it all, but we look at a good cross section, and we do. One of the things we look for is the type of language that's used and whether it's offensive or incitement and such things, and that's part of the thing we'll take into our analysis at the end.
Do you have local people with you who do the translations?
Yes, yeah, no, of course. We have a media expert as part of our core team from the EU, and then she works with a team of I'll get this wrong, 7 or 8 monitors, something like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so we're having a conversation with Max Stevens, who is Deputy Chief Observer, European Union Election Observation Mission, Ghana 2016. Essentially, they're here to monitor our elections, but not only on election day, during, before, and then after the elections as well, right here on the AM show. So let's talk about the observations that you've made elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
How do they, for instance, resolve their electoral disputes?
Okay. In other countries, I mean, there are different models. In some countries, the election administration has a larger role in election dispute resolution. In other countries, it's the courts. And sometimes it's a mix. In a sense, every country makes its own decision on how it wants these things to be resolved. Mm-hmm. From our perspective, the important things are, firstly, there needs to be a process for the resolution of election disputes. And secondly, they need to be done in a transparent and timely way. So the bad practices you can find, I'm not saying they're here in Ghana, but it's always good to be aware of this, is when people can go decision shopping. So you go to an election commission, you make an appeal, it rejects it. So you go to a court, you make an appeal, it rejects it. You go to another court, it can go on and on. In some countries, they don't have this. So you need a point of final instance, a reasonably efficient system. Mm. But there's different ways of approaching it. The Ghanaian system is a perfectly reasonable way of having this election commission decision. You can go to court to contest that and a court decision. So, it's a perfectly sort of regular process in that regard. How
much of the court processes after the 2012 elections did you monitor? Because we were in court for such a long time.
You were, and I of course couldn't be here for 8 months or 9 months. I was here actually in 2012 observing the election, but we left just, I think, 2 weeks after the election. So we're very much focusing on the process up to the announcement of the result.
Did you think we were going to be in courts?
I remember when we left, the opposition was saying they were going to go to court, and I think that was just starting. So, and that's what happened, and that's fine. Again, that's what's foreseen. Your constitution says that if you want to petition against the results of the presidential election, you go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heard it, and it issued a ruling. It took quite a long time to do that, but that's another issue. It issued a very detailed ruling, and although it ultimately rejected the complaint and upheld the result, it issued a whole series of comments on different parts of the process. And I think that sort of fed into the later reform process. So I think there's some good things came out of that.
Mm. Do you see us implement some of the recommendations?
Yeah, as I said earlier, this thing about the biometric verification machines, I think I was here in 2012 and I saw the implication of, no fingerprint, no vote.
Yeah.
And that
no verification, no votes.
No verification, no vote, sorry, yeah.
Now we have another,
and now you have a
it doesn't verify.
Yeah, and I know there's a level of uncertainty about, once you start having alternative things. My personal impression and the recommendation we made in 2012 when I was here is that it's good to have a backup system, because there were people standing there through no fault of their own were disenfranchised just because their fingerprint was worn because of the type of work they do, or because the machine had got greasy, or because the battery wasn't working properly. That's not what should happen. The point of an election is to try and facilitate the franchise to vote, but in a safe and secure way with the integrity of the vote. So I think what Ghana's come up with now is a good alternative. You've got you can do the fingerprint verification. If that doesn't work for whatever reason, you've got the barcode on the electoral register, which still on the machine throws up the picture of the person, and you can look at the picture and verify the person is who they say they are. So I think it's a good mechanism to have been brought in, yeah.
Mm. Some of us haven't monitored other elections, even on the continent. Mm-hmm. We're only used to what we do here.
Yeah.
But we've also heard that other places are not as smooth as what happens in Ghana. I know that you don't compare with what you do as a monitoring mission, but what do you think about African leaders? I mean, is it the power? Are we so power drunk we want to hold on at all costs?
I don't know. I don't have to comment on that. I mean, I think, you know, elections are a contest for power, and that's the, you know, if you speak to an academic, that's how they'll start to define elections. And people get very concerned about the winner-takes-all mentality sometimes in an election, not only as it relates to the first-past-the-post system, which Ghana has and which we have in the UK as well, but in winner-takes-all in the sense of a broader sense that once people come to power. So I know there's always, in many countries one visits, there's a discussion about this, but as I say, I don't really want to sort of compare countries or comment on others at this stage.
I understand.
I think you know, Ghana's got a history. In your introduction, you talked about this is the 7th election since the introduction of the multi-party system with 2 changes of power. I think Ghana's got a lot to be proud of. I think what it needs to do is recognise what it's got to be proud of, keep building on it, keep strengthening it, and keep making it better and better. That's the important thing for Ghana, not to compare it to elsewhere.
If you were to give us some prompters with what you've observed so far, what would you say to all of us?
I don't know.
Going into the elections.
Yeah, I'd say that at this point in the election, the same as you'd say anywhere, to be honest. You know, there needs to be a peaceful election. The election authorities need to be allowed to do their job and get on with organising it. And the political parties and the election commission need to try and find a good, constructive relationship. There needs to be patience once the process is underway, and patience once the results process is underway. But at the same time, on the election authorities' shoulders, there must be transparency. There must be confidence, so the stakeholders feel confidence in it and then feel confidence in the result at the end, and that the result is accepted whichever way it goes. That's the most important thing. Yeah. You know, I look at this in many countries. Once an election is over, the most important thing is that the day after the country moves on.
That's true.
And it doesn't get bogged down in an election, bringing the country down. So you need good, strong, good laws, you need good structures, you need constructive engagement, and you need transparent and confidence in it, and you need a peaceful environment for the election.
Sure. Did you monitor the US elections, by the way?
I didn't personally. My partner, my girlfriend, is there as an observer. There was a large international observation mission there, 300 people, 298 people. And they issued their report a couple of days ago. I was looking at that. It was quite critical in some ways of certain aspects, and quite positive at the same time. So there is a big mission there, yeah.
So even the very mature democracies, they've got very petty issues as well.
Do you know, we had an observation mission in the UK, and they identified the problems that I, as a UK voter, would always identify myself. You know, lack of proper identification of voters being one, and the very sort of lax postal voting system. In the US, you had the fact that each state of the US has a different election law. So you have 50 different election laws, and then within each state, I don't know the American system very well, but each district has its own way of doing it. There's different laws on the right to vote in different states. So it's really, it's quite a very different system in the US, and it's pretty unique. And so it's quite interesting. But every country has its issues. Every country has things it can improve on. And that's the lesson. I know there's been large international missions in Europe, in the UK, France, Germany, Norway, Spain, and now in the US, and every time, wherever they go, they come up with a long series of things that they think could be improved for the future. So it's important to bear that in mind.
I was just thinking after monitoring, okay, well, not really like monitoring, just watching and seeing how things were going, the US elections, that maybe it's wrong to copy what somebody else is doing. Just figure out what works best for you.
It is.
And keep improving upon it.
No, it is. It's like, yes, definitely. The legal and political process in any country reflects its own traditions and its own history and its own cultures to some extent. There are good practices which we always think can be helpful, but you never say that this is what must happen, one size fits all. Every country should come up with its own ideas of how to organise itself, and it needs to work for that country. But as I say, there are certain good practices, there are certain minimum standards, and countries commit themselves to international standards. But that offers quite a flexible approach into how you organise yourself.
So you're not, back to your being here, you're not here because you fear something could happen. That's why you're here to monitor.
No, it's very much a support mechanism. You know, the European Union is supporting Ghana, and it's further strengthening and deepening of democracy, really.
Oh, the EU has given us a lot of money, and they want to see how we are using the monies that they've given us.
I don't know about that. I'm just the observation mission.
Yeah, so. I get it. But thank you so much
Okay.
for your time.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here. We wish you well. Any new things you've learned from Ghana?
I don't know new
Nothing?
things. No,
You were here in 2012.
I was here in 2012.
And you're back here in 2016.
I've learned where the courts are. Yeah.
We'll teach you a few things. But we're grateful that you could join us here
Thanks
on the
very
show.
much.
That's Max Stevens. He's Deputy Chief Director, European Union Election Observation Mission, Ghana 2016. It's just some 56 minutes after 7 here on the AM show. Today we'll bring you a peace message from the General Overseer of the Solid Rock Chapel International, Reverend Christiana Dotete, who's asking her fellow pastors to stop giving prophecies that will endanger the peace in the country.
We cry for peace, perfect peace. Lord, we cry for love.
My name is Christiana Dotete, the General Overseer of Solid Rock Chapel International. The message of peace is not only for elections, because life goes on after elections. And so peace is inevitable for every nation, especially Ghana, because I am a Ghanaian, and every family and everybody. There are always talks on peace, but it behoves on every party, and when I say party, everybody, to implement peace. Somebody said, if you think peace is expensive, try war. Ghana has been a home for refugees for many years. We cannot afford to become refugees if we refuse to learn from all that is happening around us. We are surrounded by French-speaking countries, and many of us cannot speak French. We only know one sentence of French. So you can imagine if somebody pushes us into war, where do we run to? What happens to our children? What happens to the future of this great nation we call Ghana, that we love so much? When Black Stars are playing football against any other nation, every Ghanaian supports Black Star, because we know it is our nation's club. Now it is Ghana.
This is not a peace song, it's a love song. Peace and Ghana getting married.
Ghana again going into elections. We are still one Ghana. Political parties will come and go. Ghana remains Ghana. Let us therefore fight for the peace of this nation. We need peace during Christmas. We need peace during festivals. We need peace every day in our lives and in our homes, so that this nation will be what God has ordained it to be. Don't allow any politician to push you into doing anything silly. If somebody tells you to go and do something that you feel is not doable, tell the person to send his son or her son to go and do it. Let us ensure that the peace we preach is maintained in our everyday lives, especially before, during, and after our elections. In every facet of our life, let us champion the cause of peace by our way of life and the things we say to each other. We have only one Ghana. To our pastors and prophets, whatever gift that God has given to you, you have to use wisdom. Because the other day I saw in the news that a man has butchered the grandmother because he was told that she is responsible for his glory. He has taken his glory. Instead of you tilting to one direction, why not just speak a language that will be favorable to all? If God has shown you that Mr. So-and-so is going to be the winner of the elections, to avoid confusions and all kinds of things, just speak the way God will address the issues. To our electoral commission and all who work there, this is a very high office. Above everything, you need wisdom to execute your duties, so that instead of causing peace to reign, it shouldn't be chaos. Whatever people need to know, let them know beforehand. And to our security agencies, the message I speak to the pastors and the electoral commission, I speak same to you. Don't tilt to one direction. Whatever party you support, you believe in, let it be in your heart. Don't do anything that will make people suspicious of your position or your duties. We have only one Ghana. For me, I love my kenke and fish. I don't want to be a refugee anywhere. I believe you don't want to be a refugee either. Let us maintain the peace and let us sustain it. It is possible. May the peace of God take residence in every home, in every office, in every school, in every market. Shalom.
And that's Reverend Christine Jotete with her peace message. We hope that you all heard and you didn't just hear, but we're actually going to act on it. To the prophets who are making all those prophecies, stop giving prophecies that will endanger the peace in our country. But Roland, yesterday I kept saying, oh, Bernice Abu-Baidoo is going to circle, Bernice Abu-Baidoo is going to circle. And
she didn't go?
She did, but we couldn't get it in good time for our show.
You mean she didn't go in good time?
No, she did. She did.
Technical
stuff. But this is for us only. Sights and sounds and a few people speaking. This is small Dubai, man. We'll come back with AM Talk.
Is that what they said?
Yeah, small Dubai, man. Haven't you been there this morning? Roland doesn't live like around that side, though.
Oh, I wanted to see how that stretches.
He went to Dubai before coming.
Oh, no. I just took 2 rounds of the place to have an assessment of myself.
So
you know, when you go to Dubai, alhamdulillah, to all citizens of Dubai, especially Abu Dhabi and the rest, you get to see good edifices. So I wanted to see whether the comparison being made is true.
Yeah?
But,
all right. Watch what we have for you.
Sorry, Aliachi.
I'm called Nyapunsa. We go Kaswa, we go Malang, we go Kanishin, Udoko, a lot of places.
And what do you think about this new circulating?
We are, first and foremost, we are grateful to the government because the government promised to revamp the area to make the area look very good for us as part of the contract. So we are very grateful and we shall always be grateful to the government.
Okay, I know it's early days now, but do you see the benefit of this? Are you already seeing the benefit?
Really, really, yes. It has a lot of benefits. And now that those benefits are coming up.
What are some of those benefits, if you can tell us?
Formerly, when it rains, this place gets very muddy, and the passengers will be complaining, saying all sorts of things, insulting us, that we are not keeping the place tidy or neat. It's one. Then, secondly, we have no wall around the premises, so any man of people just come in, then still, or sometimes it's a whole lot of misunderstanding among the drivers and the passengers and those who come around.
So now you have a wall?
Yeah, we have a wall. We have there will be a security here to guide us.
Oh, compared to the old one, I think this one is very unique and special. When I got this one, I was like, wow, this place is changed to me because I want to go to this side, but I'm also late. I want to go and check certain things. But finally speaking, these places have become very nice and very beautiful. I can be proud of it. I'm proud to be a Ghanaian now.
Alassane Suleiman.
Suleiman. And what do you think about this new circle station compared to the old one?
Wow, very beautiful, and I like it. Very, very beautiful. It's almost like a Dubai. Accra looks like a Dubai, and very like it. And I like Mama. He has done a very, very good job. Very great job. Very great job. Very great job for Ghana. But this makes him to pursue us. In fact, I like it. I like the job. Very good.
Almost a man West Station Hunt Daddy. Nayan Daddy, so I ended into a moment when I